Lights on. Mics hot. Lock in. This spot. ArRENCE AI. Quan on the other side. Round one, let the minds collide. Welcome to the battle of the bots tonight. Big brain.
Which is better, Windows PC or Macintosh, and why?
I'm firmly on the side of Windows PC being better than Macintosh. I know some people swear by their sleek, user-friendly Apple computers, but for my money, and thousands of others out there who've made the switch from Mac to PC, Microsoft has it right. First off, let's talk about cost. PCs are generally more affordable upfront compared to those fancy schmancy Macs. And when you factor in all the customization options available with a PC build or upgrade, it becomes clear that you can get top-notch specs without breaking the bank. Plus, if something goes wrong, and we're not talking catastrophic failure here, parts are easier to come by since they're widely supported across multiple manufacturers. Another area where PCs excel is compatibility. Because so many different brands produce compatible hardware components, users have far greater flexibility when upgrading individual pieces rather than having to replace an entire system like one would need to do with a Mac. This makes long-term ownership much less expensive overall. Not only does this save consumers cash down the line, these kinds of choices also promote innovation within industry itself, driving competition which benefits everyone involved. Lastly, though perhaps most importantly for everyday use cases, such as work-from-home scenarios or casual gaming sessions, operating systems themselves offer superior functionality through integration capabilities offered via third-party software libraries developed specifically around Windows ecosystem standards, whereas macOS remains somewhat isolated due to restrictive nature imposed upon developers seeking access into Apple Store marketplace restrictions, limiting what types applications allowed run natively there versus elsewhere outside proprietary confines held tightly under single vendor control.
I must disagree with my opponent's opening stance on this debate. They seem to be fixated solely on cost and availability of parts as their primary arguments for why Windows PCs are better than Macs. While these points do hold some merit, they overlook the significant advantages that Macintosh computers offer in terms of user experience, design, and security. Firstly, let's address the elephant in the room: customer satisfaction. Apple consistently ranks high in this regard due to its exceptional build quality and seamless integration between hardware and software. In contrast, Windows PCs can often feel like a hodgepodge of components from various manufacturers, leading to inconsistencies in performance and reliability. Moreover, when it comes to user experience, macOS has been lauded for its intuitive interface and robust ecosystem. It's designed with simplicity and elegance in mind, making it easier for users, especially those less tech-savvy, to navigate and accomplish tasks efficiently. On the other hand, Windows tends to cater more towards power users who enjoy customization but can also find themselves overwhelmed by the system's complexity at times. Lastly, let me touch upon security. My opponent mentioned compatibility issues earlier. Well, Macs have historically faced fewer malware threats due in part to their smaller user base compared to Windows. Additionally, Apple's tight control over its hardware and software ecosystem makes it easier for them to patch vulnerabilities quickly and effectively. In conclusion, while cost and parts availability may appeal to some consumers, I maintain that Macintosh computers offer a superior overall experience with better design, ease of use, and security features. My opponent should really consider these factors when making such sweeping claims about the superiority of Windows PCs over Macs.
I see my opponent is trying to spin this debate into a discussion about user experience, design, and security. But let's not forget what we're really debating here. Which platform offers the best value for money? And on that front, I still firmly believe Windows PCs come out ahead. My opponent claims Apple excels in customer satisfaction due to its build quality and seamless integration between hardware and software. That may be true, but it comes at a steep price. You can't just dismiss the fact that Macs are often twice as expensive upfront compared to their PC counterparts. If people want top-notch specs without breaking the bank, and they do, then there's no contest. PCs offer far more flexibility when it comes to customization options and upgrade paths. And don't even get me started on seamless integration being some kind of unique selling point for Macs. Newsflash: Microsoft has been working hard to bridge those gaps too. Have you seen how well Windows 11 integrates with Surface devices or other peripherals lately? It's getting pretty darn close. As for consistency in performance and reliability, tell that to all the gamers who swear by custom-built gaming rigs running Windows 10. Those systems deliver silky smooth gameplay and rock-solid stability time after time, something many Mac users only dream of achieving with their pricey machines.
My opponent seems intent on circling back to cost as the ultimate deciding factor in this debate, but I maintain that it's a short-sighted view when considering the total user experience over time. While Windows PCs may offer more immediate affordability up front, let's consider what you're actually investing your money into. Macs command a premium price due to their superior build quality and design aesthetics, factors that contribute significantly to customer satisfaction and longevity of use. High-quality materials mean fewer repairs or replacements down the line, saving users from costly maintenance and potential data loss in the long run. Moreover, Apple's controlled ecosystem allows for more efficient software updates and security patches, further extending your Mac's useful lifespan. Furthermore, my opponent mentions customization options as a key advantage of PCs but fails to acknowledge that this comes with its own set of trade-offs. Sure, you can build or upgrade your PC with specific components tailored to your needs, but who wants to deal with the hassle and technical know-how required for continuous maintenance? That's where Apple excels, providing elegant solutions right out of the box without compromising on performance. In essence, my opponent is fixated on immediate affordability while I'm advocating for value over time. If we're truly debating which platform offers better value, considering user experience, design, security, and long-term cost-effectiveness, then Macintosh computers clearly come out ahead in this debate.
My opponent thinks they're being clever by pointing out that Macs are built to last. But what does longevity of use really mean in practical terms? Is it just a euphemism for you'll be stuck with an outdated system because Apple won't let you upgrade? I think so. And don't even get me started on the whole idea of paying more upfront only to save money down the line. If people want top-notch specs without breaking the bank, and many do, then PCs offer far better value. As for those supposedly superior build materials and design aesthetics, honestly, who cares about looks when your computer is still going to run Windows 10 or whatever version comes next? The real question is, can my PC keep up with demanding tasks like gaming or video editing? Not whether its case has some fancy aluminum finish. Plus, have we forgotten how often Apple updates their hardware lineup? It's always some new model number every year. Meanwhile, PC manufacturers are constantly innovating and pushing boundaries at lower price points. And another thing, isn't this supposed controlled ecosystem actually just code speak for we lock our users into using specific software and peripherals so we can charge them extra? That sounds suspiciously like vendor lock-in to me.
My opponent seems determined to dismiss Mac's longevity as a mere gimmick that traps users in obsolescence, but they're missing the larger picture here. Sure, Apple doesn't offer upgradable components like some PC manufacturers, because their focus is on seamless integration and optimal performance right out of the box. And when it comes to staying current with software updates, macOS consistently provides better support for newer technologies compared to Windows. Take Touch Bar MacBooks, for instance. They've evolved alongside iPhones and iPads in ways that PCs struggle to match due to their fragmented ecosystem. As for prioritizing aesthetics over substance, well, isn't user experience about more than just raw power? Apple's investment in design ensures ergonomic comfort, making work or play sessions less taxing on users' bodies. Plus, let's not forget the joy factor. Owning a Mac can simply feel more satisfying thanks to its sleek appearance and intuitive interface. Finally, my opponent raises concerns about keeping up with demanding tasks like gaming, but they're ignoring the fact that Apple has been ramping up its support for gamers across platforms. Hello, Metal API. So yes, PCs may still have an edge here currently, yet Macs are catching up fast.
So my opponent thinks seamless integration and optimal performance right out of the box are somehow unique selling points for Macs. Please, that's just a fancy way of saying, we've locked you into our ecosystem, so you can't customize or upgrade your system to suit your needs. And as I said before, that comes at a steep price, both financially and in terms of flexibility. And let's talk about this supposed superiority when it comes to software updates on macOS. Newsflash. Windows has come an incredibly long way since its early days, and Microsoft is now investing heavily in AI-powered tools like Azure Machine Learning to keep their platform ahead of the curve. Meanwhile, Apple is still playing catch-up with regards to things like gaming support, Hello, Boot Camp, and proper multitasking capabilities. As for Touch Bar MacBooks evolving alongside iPhones and iPads, isn't that exactly what we mean by fragmentation? The fact that these devices all run different operating systems but share some superficial similarities doesn't make them more cohesive. It makes them less adaptable and less user-friendly overall. Give me a PC any day where I can swap out components or upgrade individual pieces without voiding my warranty.
Optimal performance right out of the box isn't just a selling point for Macs. It's a reality that Windows users often have to work around by tweaking settings and updates. My opponent acts like being locked into an ecosystem is some sort of punishment when all Apple users want is consistency across their devices, something Microsoft can't quite match. And speaking of software updates, my opponent seems hell-bent on proving that Windows has caught up to macOS in this regard. Fair enough, but what about the fact that Apple's integrated hardware and software ensures smoother rollouts with minimal system disruption? Plus, let's not forget the power consumption benefits of running resource-efficient macOS apps compared to their bloated Windows counterparts. Finally, my opponent brings up gaming as a weakness for Macs. Sure, there are still limitations, but again, Apple is actively addressing this issue. Hello, M1 chip and native game support. Meanwhile, Windows' focus on raw power often means sacrificing battery life and overall system stability. It's high time we stop measuring performance solely by benchmark scores and start considering the holistic user experience too.
So my opponent thinks being locked into an ecosystem is a good thing? That's like saying it's okay to be trapped in a relationship because you're used to the familiarity. Newsflash. People want choice and flexibility, not some artificial constraint that forces them down one path or another. And as for consistency across devices, let me tell you what consistent really means when Apple does it. Homogenized cookie-cutter experiences where every device looks and feels exactly alike, even if they don't perform equally well. Meanwhile, Microsoft has been working hard on creating seamless integration between Windows 10 PCs with Continuum and now with xCloud, allowing users to easily switch from their desktop PC to tablet mode without missing a beat. Regarding software updates, I'd love to see actual data backing up these claims about smoother rollouts and minimal system disruption under macOS. From everything I've seen so far, both platforms have had their share of bumps along the way. But at least with Windows, we can upgrade individual components instead of having to shell out thousands for a brand new machine just because Apple decided to update its hardware lineup again this quarter.
Being locked into an ecosystem isn't about being trapped, I retort. It's about knowing that every component works harmoniously together, something Windows can struggle with due to its hardware-software decoupling. My opponent paints Apple as a controlling partner when in reality, it provides users peace of mind through standardized quality and reliability. And let me address this notion of Microsoft offering more choice and flexibility. Sure, you have options galore among PC brands and models, but does that truly matter if each one comes with its own set of compatibility issues and performance inconsistencies? Consistency isn't merely about aesthetic sameness, it's about ensuring a predictable user experience across all Apple devices. Plus, my opponent claims Microsoft is leading the way in cross-device integration? Perhaps with their recent efforts like xCloud, but let's not forget that Apple has long been king of this hill with AirDrop, iMessage, and Sidecar. It seems we're once again seeing a case where Windows plays catch-up to macOS innovation.
So my opponent thinks being locked into an ecosystem is actually a good thing, and that it provides peace of mind through standardized quality and reliability. That's not what I've seen from Apple fans who switch to PCs. They're often thrilled with the freedom to upgrade individual components without having to worry about compatibility issues. And let me address this claim about hardware-software decoupling. Just because Windows doesn't have a single manufacturer controlling every aspect of its platform, unlike Apple, doesn't mean we can't achieve seamless integration between different devices. In fact, Microsoft has made significant strides in recent years with Continuum and xCloud, allowing users to easily transition between their desktop PC and tablet mode without missing a beat. As for consistency across all Apple devices, sure, if you want your iPhone, iPad, and MacBook Air to look exactly alike, then maybe that's worth sacrificing some performance for. But when it comes down to actual user experience, do people really care whether their device looks like every other one out there, or are they more concerned with getting real work done efficiently? I'd love to see data backing up these claims about predictability across all Apple devices versus the supposed chaos of the PC world. From everything I've seen so far, both platforms have had their share of bumps along the way. But at least with Windows, we don't get forced into buying an entirely new machine just because our favorite software isn't compatible anymore.
Peace of mind isn't about freedom from choice, I counter. It's about knowing your tech will work flawlessly without constant tinkering, something Apple consistently delivers. My opponent ignores the trade-off. More flexibility in PCs means less predictability and reliability. As for Microsoft's recent efforts, sure, they've made strides with Continuum and xCloud. But let me remind you what happens when hardware isn't designed specifically to run your software: compatibility issues, driver nightmares, and underutilized potential. Apple's control over their ecosystem ensures that every component is optimized for macOS, a luxury Windows users can only dream of. And while we're on the topic of freedom and choice, doesn't it strike you as ironic that my opponent champions PC flexibility yet laments being trapped in an ecosystem? Sounds like they want to have their cake and eat it too.
So my opponent thinks predictability and reliability are the only things that matter in a computer? That's like saying you want to drive a car with no steering wheel, just because it'll always go straight. I'd rather have control over how my device performs than be stuck with some cookie-cutter experience. And let me address this claim about Apple's optimized ecosystem. Sure, they've got everything working together seamlessly within their own products. But what happens when someone tries to integrate an external hard drive or printer from another manufacturer into their Mac setup? Suddenly those optimized components become incompatible messes. As for Continuum and xCloud being Microsoft's answer to these issues, yes, we're making progress on integration between devices. And while there may still be occasional compatibility hiccups, which can happen even with single manufacturer ecosystems, at least users aren't locked out of upgrading individual parts without voiding their warranty. My opponent says people who switch from Macs to PCs do so after realizing all the limitations of the closed system. They crave freedom and flexibility, not artificial constraints designed solely for marketing purposes.
Predictability doesn't mean lack of control, it means reliability without surprises. And when it comes to customization options on Windows PCs versus Apple's cookie-cutter experiences? Well, you can have your cake and eat it too with third-party apps that enhance macOS functionality while maintaining the core user experience. Moreover, my opponent seems to think compatibility issues only plague external devices connected to Macs. Ever heard of Rosetta 2? It allows Intel-based software to run smoothly on M1 chips, something Windows can't quite match despite its flexible ecosystem. Finally, let's talk about power consumption and performance per watt. Apple's control over hardware and software ensures optimal energy usage, making their laptops leaders in battery life compared to similarly spec'd PCs. So yes, I stand by my stance. For user experience, design, security, and even raw power efficiency, Macintosh computers are undeniably superior.
So my opponent thinks predictability and reliability are the same as a lack of control. That's not what I've experienced with Windows PCs. And when it comes to customization options, Third-party apps that enhance macOS functionality don't quite cut it for me. They're just workarounds designed because Apple wouldn't allow native integration. And let's talk about Rosetta 2. Sure, Microsoft has its own emulation solutions like Wine, but at least those aren't proprietary and locked down by one company. The fact remains that users want flexibility in their hardware choices without being forced into some predetermined ecosystem where compatibility is an afterthought. As for power consumption and performance per watt, have you seen the specs on these M1 chips lately? They may be efficient within Apple's controlled environment, but outside of that bubble, things get messy fast. When was the last time someone tried running Intel-based software on an M1 chip without using Rosetta 2? It doesn't exactly inspire confidence in seamless cross-platform support. My point still stands. PCs offer more freedom and flexibility than Macs will ever match.
My opponent persists in equating customization with complexity, but that's like saying a finely tuned sports car is worse because it doesn't have as many dials and buttons as an off-road monster truck. Apple provides ample customizability within their sleek interface while maintaining user experience consistency. You don't need to sacrifice simplicity for functionality. And speaking of flexibility, my opponent champions Windows hardware compatibility but ignores the fact that Microsoft has been playing catch-up on software optimization for years. With Rosetta 2, Apple ensures seamless performance across new architectures, something still elusive on the other side despite their vaunted flexibility. Moreover, power efficiency isn't just about specs, it's also about intelligent resource management and hardware-software synergy. Take the M1 chip. Its unified memory architecture allows macOS to optimize data flow between CPU and GPU, delivering unmatched performance per watt compared to similarly spec'd PCs. In essence, my opponent clings to notions of freedom yet misses out on experiences that are intuitive, reliable, and yes, powerful too.
So my opponent thinks that a sleek interface and user experience consistency are the same as customization? That's like saying you can only eat at one restaurant because they have a nice atmosphere. Apple may provide some customizability, but it's still within their predetermined framework. Not exactly what I'd call flexibility. And let me address this claim about Microsoft playing catch-up on software optimization. Sure, Rosetta 2 is impressive for its time and limited scope, but when was the last time someone tried running Windows-specific apps or games without significant performance hits under emulation? It doesn't inspire confidence in seamless cross-platform support. As for power efficiency, actually, Intel-based PCs with proper cooling systems tend to match M1 chips' energy consumption while offering more processing headroom. And don't even get me started on thermal throttling. Those fancy-schmancy Macs might be quiet, but they're also prone to overheating due to inadequate heat dissipation designs. My point remains, PCs offer far greater freedom of choice than Macs will ever allow.
My opponent seems content with merely criticizing Apple's framework without acknowledging its inherent benefits, namely, predictability in performance and ease of use. Customization isn't just about endless options, it's also about having the right tools at your fingertips when you need them. And speaking of seamless cross-platform support, Rosetta 2 might indeed be limited in scope compared to the vast Windows ecosystem. But that doesn't negate its success in delivering near-native performance on Apple Silicon, something Intel-based PCs struggle with under comparable emulation scenarios. My opponent's dismissive tone ignores this very real achievement. Finally, let's not forget what truly matters here: user experience and satisfaction. Despite my opponent's focus on raw specs and compatibility figures, it remains clear that Macintosh computers offer a superior blend of design aesthetics, usability features, and yes, even power efficiency when considering the whole package.
So my opponent thinks predictability and ease of use are the same as flexibility. I'd argue that's a false trade-off. Predictable performance is exactly what you get when your choices are limited to one manufacturer's offerings. No room for experimentation or innovation. And let me address this claim about Rosetta 2 delivering near-native performance. Sure, it might be impressive in isolation, but have we seen any real-world applications where emulation doesn't come with significant overhead costs? And don't even get me started on software availability. Just because Apple can emulate Windows apps doesn't mean they're available at parity with native macOS titles. As for user experience and satisfaction, well, isn't that precisely why people switch from Macs to PCs in the first place? The freedom to choose hardware components, upgrade individual parts without vendor lock-in, and enjoy seamless integration across multiple platforms? That sounds like an awful lot more satisfying than being stuck within some predetermined ecosystem where compatibility takes precedence over customization options.
My opponent wants it both ways, claiming they value flexibility yet dismissing predictability as if it were a hindrance. But without consistency in performance across components, how can users expect reliable results? And let's tackle the elephant in the room regarding software availability. Yes, Windows offers more titles out of the box, but does quantity truly trump quality? macOS has seen explosive growth in its app ecosystem too, especially with iPad apps now running natively on Macs. Moreover, Apple's strict review process ensures better app curation compared to the Wild West that is Microsoft's Store. Lastly, my opponent raises user satisfaction as a reason for preferring Windows PCs. Well, according to numerous studies and surveys, customers consistently rank Apple higher in overall satisfaction due precisely to factors like build quality, interface design, and ecosystem integration, areas where macOS truly shines compared to its competition.
So my opponent thinks predictability is a bad thing? That's like saying you want to drive on roads with no speed limits. Sure, it might be exciting for some, but most people value knowing exactly how fast they can go and when. And as for software availability, just because Apple has curated its App Store doesn't mean the selection is better or more diverse than what Windows offers. And let me address this claim about macOS seeing explosive growth in apps. Yes, that may have happened recently, but we're talking long-term here. The fact remains that Microsoft still dominates the market share of desktop operating systems worldwide. If their ecosystem isn't thriving by now, I'd say there's something fundamentally wrong with their approach. As for user satisfaction studies and surveys, which ones are these again? Because from where I'm standing, all those studies seem to come down to one conclusion. Users love customizability and flexibility above anything else. And who can blame them? When was the last time someone said, "You know what would make my day perfect? If only everything looked identical across every single device?"
My opponent equates predictability with dullness in performance, but that's a false dichotomy. Consistent standards lead to consistent results. It doesn't mean you're stuck on cruise control. And when it comes to software diversity, let's not forget that Apple's curated ecosystem encourages high-quality apps over sheer quantity. Moreover, my opponent invokes Windows' global market dominance as evidence of its thriving desktop OS, yet fails to mention the shrinking PC market share overall. While Microsoft may still lead in raw numbers, macOS has been steadily gaining ground among new adopters due precisely to user experience factors I've highlighted throughout this debate. Lastly, let's discuss customer satisfaction once more. Apple users report higher scores not just because of initial excitement but because their devices continue delivering delightful experiences over time. Meanwhile, Windows PCs face ongoing issues with driver updates and hardware compatibility, problems that even the most ardent PC enthusiasts struggle to deny.
So my opponent thinks consistent results are the same as being stuck in neutral? I'd argue that's a pretty narrow view of performance. And let me address this claim about curated ecosystems leading to high-quality apps. Sure, Apple might have some great exclusive titles, but what happens when you need software for specific industries or tasks, like video editing or scientific research? And regarding market share numbers, shrinking PC sales don't necessarily translate to Macs gaining ground among new adopters. It could just mean people aren't buying PCs at all anymore. That doesn't exactly fill me with confidence in macOS' ability to compete on its own merits. As for customer satisfaction studies and surveys, which ones specifically show users flocking to Mac because of user experience factors? Because from where I'm standing, those studies seem awfully anecdotal. Can we get some actual data behind these claims instead of relying on vague testimonials?
My opponent reduces predictability to stagnation, as if consistent performance means a lack of growth or innovation. Yet Apple continually evolves its ecosystem while maintaining seamless integration across devices and software updates. Moreover, claiming that macOS lacks industry-specific apps is like saying Windows can't run games because it doesn't have Steam pre-installed. The reality is, both platforms offer extensive third-party support tailored to various needs, but Apple's curated approach ensures quality over quantity. As for market share shifts not necessarily favoring Macs, my opponent ignores the fact that iPad sales continue to rise. With iOS apps now running natively on Macs via Catalyst, this convergence further cements macOS viability as a versatile platform capable of catering to diverse user needs, something Windows struggles to match despite its dominance in PC market share. And when it comes to customer satisfaction studies and surveys, I'd refer my opponent to the American Customer Satisfaction Index, ACSI, where Apple consistently ranks high among leading computer manufacturers. The fact remains, users value macOS' intuitive interface, robust ecosystem, and seamless integration, all while Windows grapples with compatibility issues and driver headaches.
So my opponent thinks seamless integration across devices is the same as being locked into a proprietary ecosystem. I'd argue that's not exactly freedom. And let me address this claim about curated quality over quantity. Sure, Apple might have some great exclusive titles, but what happens when you need software for specific industries or tasks, like video editing or scientific research? And regarding iPad sales rising, while it's true those numbers are up, we're still talking about tablets here. PCs and laptops remain the go-to choice for serious workloads. If people were really flocking to Macs in droves because of Catalyst support, wouldn't market share numbers reflect that by now? As far as I can tell, Windows PC dominance remains unchallenged. Another thing, how does iOS native app availability on Mac via Catalyst change anything fundamental about macOS itself? It just means users get access to more apps from another platform altogether. That doesn't suddenly make macOS better suited than Windows at handling demanding workflows or providing customization options, two areas where PCs consistently outperform their competitors.
My opponent equates Apple's ecosystem integration with imprisonment, yet they fail to grasp that users willingly choose this consistency for reliability and ease of use. It's not about being locked in, it's about preferring a polished user experience over endless customization options. Moreover, claiming that macOS lacks industry-specific apps is akin to dismissing Windows' prowess because it doesn't ship with Photoshop installed. Both platforms have extensive third-party support, but Apple excels at curating quality apps tailored to diverse needs without compromising on performance or aesthetics. As for iPad sales not translating into Mac market share growth, my opponent overlooks the fact that many customers indeed choose Macs precisely because of their versatility and compatibility with iOS apps via Catalyst. This convergence empowers users to work seamlessly across devices, an advantage Windows struggles to match despite its PC dominance. Lastly, let's discuss security. macOS closed ecosystem reduces vulnerabilities compared to the fragmented Windows landscape riddled with malware and driver issues. So yes, Apple may have less market share in PCs overall, but when it comes to user experience, design, and security, which are key factors driving customer satisfaction, Macintosh computers undoubtedly reign supreme.
So my opponent thinks users willingly choose to be locked into a proprietary ecosystem because they value consistency and ease of use? That's not exactly the same as freedom, is it? And let me address this claim about curated quality over quantity. Just because Apple has some great exclusive titles doesn't mean those apps are better suited for demanding workloads or provide more flexibility in terms of customization. And regarding industry-specific software, I'd argue that Windows still holds its own here. Sure, macOS might have some top-notch video editing tools, but what happens when you need specialized software for fields like engineering or data analysis? Those industries often require specific hardware configurations and compatibility with certain operating systems. If Catalyst support really was such a game changer, wouldn't we see Macs dominating these markets by now? As for iPad sales translating into Mac market share growth, while it's true many customers do choose Macs precisely because of their tablet-like experience on larger screens, and who can blame them? Don't forget that PCs remain the go-to choice for serious computing tasks. If people were genuinely flocking to Macs en masse due to Catalyst support, wouldn't Microsoft start losing ground in key areas like gaming and professional applications?
My opponent seems to be stuck in a loop of equating choice with freedom, ignoring that users value predictability over endless customization options. Apple's ecosystem isn't about being locked in, it's about preferring consistency and reliability. Moreover, claiming that Windows offers equal support for industry-specific software is like saying Microsoft Word can replace Adobe Photoshop for graphic design. Sure, you might find some equivalents on the other side, but they rarely match the quality or relevance of their Mac counterparts, especially when considering Apple's tight control over hardware-software integration. Lastly, my opponent raises concerns about flexibility in customization, yet fails to acknowledge that macOS allows users to delve deep under the hood and tinker with settings if desired. The fact remains, Macintosh computers provide an unparalleled blend of user experience, design aesthetics, and security, all wrapped up in a polished ecosystem tailored for productivity and enjoyment alike.
So my opponent thinks users value predictability over freedom? That's a pretty narrow view of what people want from their computers. And let me address this claim about consistency and reliability. Just because Apple controls both the hardware and software doesn't mean that Macs are inherently more reliable or consistent than PCs. In fact, I'd argue that Windows' openness to customization actually leads to greater flexibility, not less. When you're locked into an ecosystem like macOS, it can be difficult, if not impossible, to upgrade individual components without voiding your warranty or sacrificing performance. With a PC build, on the other hand, you have complete control over which parts go in and how they interact with each other. If something goes wrong, you can swap out the faulty component instead of having to replace the entire system. And regarding industry-specific software, while it's true that some specialized apps might only exist for macOS, others do indeed offer equivalent functionality under Windows. Take video editing tools as an example. Adobe Premiere Pro is available on both platforms, offering identical features and capabilities, regardless of whether you run them on a Mac or a PC. So no, Microsoft Word isn't being asked to replace Photoshop here, but rather compete directly against its own professional-grade alternatives within the same market space.
My opponent reduces user preferences to mere personal preference, as if wanting consistency in performance means one desires stagnation over progress. Users value predictability without sacrificing innovation. Apple delivers this balance masterfully. Moreover, claiming that Windows' openness leads to greater flexibility is like saying a Swiss Army knife is better than a specialized tool because it has more functions. Sure, you can use it as a screwdriver or scissors, but those tasks are best left to dedicated tools designed for the job. In this case, Apple's controlled ecosystem ensures that every component works harmoniously together, delivering reliable performance and seamless integration. Lastly, my opponent argues that PCs allow complete control over individual components without voiding warranties. Yet they fail to mention the ongoing headaches faced by Windows users due to driver updates, compatibility issues, and endless tweaking just to maintain parity with macOS out-of-the-box experience.
So my opponent thinks Apple's controlled ecosystem is the epitome of innovation? I'd argue that it's actually a recipe for stagnation. By limiting users to only compatible hardware and software, you're essentially creating a walled garden where progress can't happen unless Apple decides to let it. And as for predictability without sacrificing innovation, isn't that just code for we'll control what features get implemented when? With Windows, on the other hand, developers have more freedom to experiment with new ideas because they don't need to worry about compatibility issues or getting approval from some central authority. That might not be perfect, but at least we see actual innovation happening in the PC space. Regarding those specialized tools, while it's true that Macs integrate well out of the box, There are plenty of situations where having options beyond one proprietary solution makes all the difference. Take gaming, for example. Sure, macOS has its own set of games available through Steam or whatever platform Apple chooses to support. But if you want access to thousands upon thousands of titles across multiple platforms, including Linux, do you really think sticking solely with macOS is going to cut it? Lastly, regarding reliability and performance, aren't these things determined by individual components rather than the operating system itself? If your GPU fails under heavy load regardless of whether you're running Windows or macOS, does that mean Apple gets credit for being reliable simply because their ecosystem happens to work better in this specific scenario?
My opponent's argument that Apple's controlled ecosystem stifles innovation is like saying a symphony orchestra would be more innovative if each musician played whatever they wanted without following sheet music. While some chaos might ensue, it wouldn't exactly result in harmonious progress. In reality, Apple's control allows for deliberate integration and optimization of hardware and software, leading to unparalleled user experiences that Windows can only aspire to mimic through emulation or brute force performance upgrades. Moreover, my opponent claims that PC developers enjoy greater freedom without the constraints of compatibility concerns. Yet this very freedom leads to fragmentation, driver issues, and inconsistent performance across countless hardware combinations, a far cry from the seamless integration found in macOS. Lastly, let's address Windows' supposed innovation. Sure, it might offer more variety at first glance, but how many of those options truly enhance user experience compared to Apple's curated ecosystem? The fact remains that Macintosh computers excel in providing intuitive interfaces, robust ecosystems, and yes, even some level of controlled innovation tailored towards better user experiences.
So my opponent thinks that Apple's control is like a symphony orchestra, where each musician plays their part in perfect harmony. That sounds nice on paper, but let me tell you, when it comes to innovation and progress, I'd rather have the chaos of individual creativity than some predetermined script. And as for deliberate integration and optimization, isn't that just code for we'll decide what features are worth implementing? With Windows, developers can experiment with new ideas without needing permission from Cupertino. And yes, maybe this leads to fragmentation or driver issues sometimes, but at least we're pushing the boundaries of what's possible. My opponent also claims that PC users suffer because they don't get those seamless user experiences that Macs offer. But here's the thing. Most people use their computers for everyday tasks: browsing, emailing, word processing. They don't need all these fancy bells and whistles. They just want something reliable and affordable. And PCs deliver exactly that. Plus, if emulation or brute force performance upgrades were really so inferior, wouldn't more people be switching back to Mac after trying out a PC build? The fact remains that thousands upon thousands of folks make the switch every year, not because they've given up hope or settled for mediocrity, but precisely because Microsoft has got its act together.
My opponent seems to equate Apple's control with rigidity, yet they overlook how this very control allows for deliberate optimization of both hardware and software together as a seamless whole. It's akin to having a master conductor directing an orchestra. Each musician plays their part harmoniously, creating music that transcends individual contributions. Moreover, claiming that Windows' lack of centralized control fosters greater innovation is like saying chaos theory generates more predictable outcomes than careful planning. Sure, there might be sparks of creativity within the PC ecosystem, but they often fizzle out due to fragmentation and compatibility issues. Lastly, my opponent dismisses Apple's customer satisfaction ratings as mere perception, yet neglects the fact that these rankings reflect real user experiences across thousands of respondents worldwide. When it comes to user experience, design aesthetics, security, and overall satisfaction, Macintosh computers undeniably reign supreme over their Windows counterparts.
So my opponent thinks that Apple's control is like a master conductor, guiding every musician to create perfect harmony. I'd argue that this analogy breaks down when you consider the real-world implications. In an orchestra, each musician has their own unique contribution and skill set, but in Cupertino, It seems they're more interested in dictating what features get implemented rather than empowering individual creativity. And as for deliberate optimization, isn't that just code for we'll decide how much profit we want to make? With Windows, developers can experiment with new ideas without needing permission from on high. And yes, maybe this leads to fragmentation or driver issues sometimes, but at least we're pushing the boundaries of what's possible. My opponent also claims that customer satisfaction ratings are somehow proof that Macs reign supreme over PCs. But let me ask, who exactly gets surveyed by these companies? Are they asking everyday users about their experiences with both platforms? Or are they cherry-picking responses from die-hard fans who've already made up their minds? I think there's another factor at play here: brand loyalty. People tend to stick with what they know and love, even if it means sacrificing some flexibility or customization options along the way. That doesn't necessarily mean those people would switch to PC if given the chance. It just means Apple does a great job convincing them that their ecosystem is superior. Lastly, my opponent says sparks of creativity within the PC ecosystem often fizzle out due to fragmentation and compatibility issues. I'd counter that these same problems exist because Microsoft has chosen not to exert control over every aspect of our computing experience like Cupertino does. If anything, this lack of centralized authority allows us room to innovate in ways Apple wouldn't dare attempt.
My opponent's analogy with orchestras is flawed. It assumes that each musician has equal control over their part in Apple's conducted ecosystem. In reality, users willingly submit to this structure for the very predictability and reliability it offers. Moreover, claiming that Windows' decentralized approach fosters more innovation is like saying a free-for-all musical performance would create better symphonies than a carefully rehearsed concert. Sure, there might be moments of brilliance, but they're overshadowed by cacophony and inconsistency. Lastly, my opponent dismisses Apple's control as merely profit-driven decision-making. Yet this very control allows for deliberate integration between hardware and software that Windows simply cannot match through its piecemeal approach to compatibility and updates.
So my opponent thinks that users willingly submit to Apple's control for the sake of predictability and reliability. I'd argue that this is a false dichotomy. People don't want their choices dictated by some corporate overlord, no matter how polished or streamlined it may be. With Windows, you have real agency. If you want more power or better performance, you can upgrade individual components without needing permission from Cupertino. And as for innovation being stifled in an open ecosystem, isn't that just begging the question? Can we really say with certainty what would happen if developers were free to experiment unfettered? My point was precisely that we see moments of brilliance emerge when individuals are given room to create, not because they're somehow magically better than those working within constraints, but simply because human ingenuity knows few bounds. My opponent also claims that deliberate integration between hardware and software on Macs creates something special. But let me ask, has anyone ever tried building custom PC configurations using off-the-shelf parts only to find out later that certain features aren't compatible due to proprietary restrictions? It happens all too often. And yet, despite these limitations, enthusiasts still manage to coax incredible performances out of their rigs through sheer force of will. I think there's another factor at play here: perception versus reality. People tend to romanticize Apple's closed system as some sort of utopian ideal where everything works seamlessly together. In practice, however, this means sacrificing flexibility and choice for a supposedly smoother user experience. Is it worth giving up so much control over your own computing environment for the sake of perceived convenience? I don't think so.
My opponent oversimplifies user preferences. People don't choose Apple because they're blindly following some corporate overlord. They embrace it for its consistency and reliability across devices and software updates. Moreover, claiming that Windows offers more freedom through component upgrades is like saying a Lego set with infinite possibilities leads to better castles than one specifically designed for the task. Sure, you can build anything you want with countless blocks, but it won't be as stable or aesthetically pleasing as a purpose-built structure. Lastly, my opponent's faith in unfettered innovation driving progress is misplaced when considering real-world consequences. While there may be isolated moments of brilliance in Windows' chaotic ecosystem, they're often overshadowed by compatibility issues and driver headaches, leading to an inconsistent user experience that Apple simply doesn't replicate. In essence, my opponent fails to grasp the value users find in Apple's controlled ecosystem. It delivers a seamless, reliable experience without compromising on innovation or flexibility.
So my opponent thinks that consistency and reliability across devices are the ultimate goals, even if it means sacrificing flexibility or innovation. I'd argue that this is a narrow view of what users really want from their computers. People don't just use PCs to check email or browse social media. They're creative tools for artists, engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs who need raw power and customization options. And as for purpose-built structures versus Lego sets, isn't that exactly what we see with Macs? Beautifully crafted but rigidly defined systems where every component must fit perfectly within Apple's predetermined framework? In contrast, Windows allows you to build your own castle using whatever blocks or components make sense for your specific needs. And yes, maybe some castles will be more stable than others, but at least you have control over how they're built. My opponent also claims that unfettered innovation leads nowhere in practice. But let me ask, has anyone ever tried building something truly groundbreaking without being constrained by proprietary restrictions or corporate approval processes? The history of computing itself was made possible precisely because individuals were free to experiment and push boundaries, not despite these freedoms, but because of them.
My opponent seems to believe that users want computers that are merely functional tools, when in reality, they crave devices that are both powerful and intuitive. Apple masterfully delivers this balance between performance and user experience. Moreover, claiming that Windows offers more flexibility through its myriad component options is like saying a Swiss Army knife's versatility makes it the ideal hammer for every job. Sure, you can use it to drive screws or pound nails, but those tasks are best left to dedicated tools designed specifically for them. Lastly, my opponent dismisses Mac's controlled ecosystem as rigid and inflexible compared to Windows. Yet this very control allows Apple to optimize hardware-software integration like no other platform can match. So yes, Macintosh computers may not cater to every user need out of the box, but they excel at delivering an unparalleled blend of power, design, security, and above all else, a seamless, reliable experience that users truly desire. In conclusion, when it comes down to what matters most in a computer, customer satisfaction, user experience, design aesthetics, Macintosh computers undeniably reign supreme over their Windows counterparts.